Hey everyone, this is Angela from Angela Heath Art Studio, and what I'm doing here is just showing you, doing a brief virtual show of my floral quilts. And so I wanted to share with you tulips. And so this one is a floral. I have some notes here and I'll kind of talk through some of my notes on this one. These pieces were done a couple of years ago, but it's really an example of what I like to do with florals. Now, everyone, I think, has, if you're a quilter for a while, and I've been quilting since 2004, I believe it is, and I think everybody has their version of what a floral is, right? So you see some quilters will utilize, realism in their florals. They try to get the flowers to look exactly like the real flower. Some people explore macro images, where you're really kind of bringing in a lot of detail for a floral. For me, I like to look at abstract florals, and I consider most of my quilting to be abstract. And so what I wanted to do with this one, this one really was inspired by Marimekko fabric, which is very, very bold in its shapes and in its colors, and it's very bright. And so what I did on this one, this is a whole cloth white background. So these white sections that you're seeing in here are not pieced in. They are really part of an entire white background, and then over that I cut some raw edge applique. And so you'll see my appliques are really not turned in, they're raw edge. And then for stitching, I like to do a very tight, what I call a channel stitching. You can use a double needle on this. And so if you attach that into your machine, and it gives you two stitching lines at the same time. I actually didn't use that for this piece. I actually really like the width of the stitches to vary here and there, and I feel like it gives it more movement as you come up onto the quilt. So I'll show a couple of these stitching areas in there. Okay, I don't know if you can see that. I'll just kind of try to get that up there. And then really what is a signature of my work is I really like bindings. And in particular, I love to choose bindings that are busy. They have something going on. It's a contrast between what's happening in the quilt. And I really had to do that here for this particular quilt because there were solid color areas, right? So it's like, how do I keep the interest and bring the vision of the solid areas? So this one is tulips. There are 3 tulips in this picture. So 1, 2, and 3. And you're really seeing them from the back of a tulip, and the green areas represent stems. So I really was looking for an interesting perspective to have for this particular piece. And then I have this floral, and this one has a really interesting story to it. This floral was really inspired by a Georgia O'Keeffe landscape. And so I started doing this as a landscape where the top of this is mountains, and then it mirrors on the image mirrors on the bottom. There's a very famous painting that she has like that. And what I decided to do, as I was kind of piecing in my appliques here, I realized that if I turned it, it gives me a very interesting floral. And so this one actually started as a landscape but became a floral, and I just put it in my floral series here. And so this one, again, has some of the same ideas. It's like raw applique. The black fabric is a whole cloth piece, and then the pieces are raw applique on, raw edge, and then I do this very, very heavy, very tight channel stitching on this one. And I'll show you that area as well. You can see some of these areas. And then in the pink area, I just wanted to come in with some free motioning, just some circles that I thought really gave it some texture. And I think this one, and then I gave it a busy border, you know, kind of a floral. This is a floral border, and I did a scallop edge on this border. So you can see that scallop edge. And I tend to do a lot of the similar bindings on these quilts, and I think it really is very successful. And I really enjoyed this series. This kind of floral series. I come out with a couple of them every couple of years, but it's kind of an open series. Now the next one that I want to show you is this one. This is a very colorful Birds of Paradise, right? I think everybody knows Birds of Paradise, right? And so we have this one. Okay, this is my Birds of Paradise one. Okay. And the nice thing about this one, the intent of it is really to make it a very colorful, very bright, very vibrant. I use the white yarn couched throughout in a small zigzag stitch. You can see the zigzags in the back here. But I wanted to use that to really make those colors pop even more. The small zigzags make this very sturdy. What I actually like about this one, you know, usually when you're couching, right, usually what you would do is if you have smaller areas in here, you want to lay down your smaller areas first, and then you come through with your larger areas that really kind of encapsulate those smaller ones, and it makes them more, it stabilizes your edges there. But what I did was, in this one, I did the reverse. So I came down with my bigger areas, my longer pieces of yarn, and then I came over that with the smaller pieces. And so what happens is my edges here, and I'll show you, you know, from here so you can see that, my edges here will kind of fray out a little bit. And that's what I really like that in this quilt, because it kind of gives it a little bit of a 3D texture effect. Okay, so I really kind of enjoyed that particular thing in this quilt. And so that's what Birds of Paradise is. Now, one of the other things that I want to note in this quilt is, I'm going to move these other ones over here. Okay. One of the other things that I did in this piece is I utilized only 2 commercial print fabrics in this piece. So one of them is here, okay, that's the same. And then the other commercial fabric that I used is this red area. The rest of the fabrics are solid color Kona fabric, right? So that kind of made it more economical. But what I challenged myself to do here is to use fabric markers to create interesting patterns within the solid Kona. So for example, in this area here, this is one big piece of light, it's a lavender color solid Kona, but it looks like 3 different fabrics. And so I really kind of wanted to differentiate by using patterns. And so what I did was I did my color fabric markers in here to create patterns on the fabric. So I left the solid color lavender, and then I created this kind of circular print, and then I created this striped print as well within the same piece of fabric there. And so I do that throughout in this piece. I did the same thing on this side. Now I'll show it to you this way. This side and this side match. And then in the blue, I used the fabric markers to bring in some detailing in the blue. I did it with the orange. This was a kind of a rust color solid Kona. And let's bring that up a little bit. You kind of see I kind of made that into a totally different fabric. And so I really kind of challenged myself in that. I really love using fabric markers. It's a great way to create your own fabric, right? Maybe I'll do a series on that, but Yeah, I mean, you can use it to create different fabrics. You can use it to enhance the detailing in a fabric. You know, I did a lot of detail work in here on the flower petals. Put some dots in there. We put some striping in there. And so you can kind of see that coming throughout. So I think that this quilt was very successful in that way. It's Birds of Paradise. And then I just did a pieced mitered border. I wanted the border to be very dynamic. So the border is gradiated, and then it has different colored dots in it. So there's a lot of life and there's a lot of movement in this border. So you can see that border coming through. And I think that's very, very successful in this fabric. You see, as I just kind of come through that edge, you can see it's a lot of movement there. So that's Birds of Paradise. Now I want to show you, the next one that I want to show you is the same pattern, okay? Because like I said, my applique were cut from a pattern, right? This is the same pattern as the one that you just saw. But in this one, what I wanted to do was come in with stitching on the background. This is a solid black background with applique on top. But this time, I did not stitch over the applique. I wanted the applique to be puffy. And I really wanted like a Trapunto effect, right? And so what I did was I did heavy, heavy stitching in the background. I did this channel stitching in the background. And then I just kind of outlined over the flowers. And what that did is now I also used a double interfacing to really make them thicker and make it stand up. Okay, so I don't know if you can see, I don't think you can see it really from the video, but these petals here are actually raised up slightly. And I think that this one was very successful. And then what I wanted to do here was really have a floral background, a floral fabric, you know, for my binding. And I thought that that was really successful as well. And so you're seeing a lot of the uglies on this one. But yeah, you know, this is kind of one of my older styles. I really don't sew in that kind of a style anymore. I think on a piece like this, because there are so many starts and stops in the sewing, what I would do is really cover the uglies on this one, right? So I would just put another piece of fabric over it and you would just see a solid background on this one. The other thing that I really like about this piece is it's a 16 by 20. And when I hang it up on the wall, it really has a tapestry size to it. And I usually just kind of hang it up with a bar, or I'll use some D-rings to just clip onto it and then just hang it up in that way. So I usually have this one in my office quite a bit. And then I want to show you another floral that I did. This one is called Rise Up, and this one is a little big. And I forget the finished size on this one. I will make sure that the archive on the website is updated with these, but I think this one is actually already on there. So this one right here, it's a little bit longer, okay, and it's really portrait. It really is it was inspired by a sunflower computer screensaver image. I think it was an image put out by Microsoft, and so it's an image of a sunflower. You're looking at it from the side, and then the petals are coming out. So what I wanted to do is to turn it on its base, and then say, hey, what would it look like if the flower, the base of the flower, were at the bottom, and then the leaves, the flower petals from the sunflower are rising up into the sunlight. And that's kind of the idea behind this piece. So rise up into the sunlight, and then you have all this activity going on here. So it's the same idea for this piece, right? So it's really kind of solid color konas. I did a little bit of texturizing here with my fabric marker, you know, did some circles in there, did some different colored circles. One of the other things I did with the fabric marker, and I think is very effective, and you can think about doing this, is you can take a commercial piece of fabric and you can enhance that fabric with your fabric marker. So in this case, I just kind of dotted, made some other colored dots here, and I feel like that really, really enhanced this piece. I did the same with it up here as well. Okay, so you can kind of see that red area is where I came in with the fabric marker and did some red and some oranges, and just to give it a little more life there. The other thing that I did with this piece is I painted on this one. So I used one of my favorite products is called Derwent, and these are markers that are permanent dyes, and they actually look like pencils. Some of them are in colored pencils, and so it allows you to draw. You have the control of drawing on your fabric. So I would draw on it. Then I took my paintbrush with a little bit of water, and then I painted, to kind of blur those out. So that gave me a softened coloration here. I really wanted the 3 petals to have different coloration, even though it's part of the same flower. It just gives it some dynamicism there. And I think this one came out pretty successful. I was very happy with the raw edge on it. The sewing on it, again, really, really happy with the sewing on this one. Okay, this one was, you can see here, what I do here is this kind of box sewing where you're starting, you box, 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 and you keep going within that shape. And you're not seeing any of the boxing. You're not going to see any of the edges. Okay, you'll just see what you're, going for. You'll see your texture there. But it's a really good way to make the closed objects, what I call closed object stitching. Okay, so you try to, within your image, you try to figure out a way to make it one whole pattern so that you have very few times where you're actually picking up the needle and ending up with a lot of snags on the back end, on the back of the quilt. So I think that this one was really very successful. The whole piece is, I think I only have, in that whole pattern, I think I only picked up the needle 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 4 or 5 times in this entire piece. And this was not done, for me, it's really simulating what a long armist would do. And so that's something that I really challenge myself to do when I'm quilting. So I think this one was really successful. So we have the Rise Up, and we have the Birds of Paradise. We have the 2 patterns there. And then we have the this one is the Georgia O'Keeffe inspired, and then we have the tulips. I do want to share with you another version of the tulips that I'm working on, so let me grab that one. And it's really at the beginning of its journey here. We're quilting on it. So this is kind of a larger version of tulips. So I'll show you that one. Is here. This is going to be square. And so what I wanted to look at doing, the first tulips was really tulips in the spring. Okay, where you have, these really bright colors, it's Marimekko inspired. I wanted to go the other direction. So in the other direction, I wanted to say, well, okay, tulips in the fall. All right, so I have the same 3 tulips. Okay, we're looking at them from the back. You have the stems going up through the flowers, and then they're coming up through the foliage, the fall foliage. And so that's why I have these kind of fall-like colors in here. And so this is one that I've been, kind of working on. You can see some of the texture is coming in, and I'll show you from here. Okay, this is really, I've actually used some of the fabric markers on the fabric to enhance the fabric already. And this is what it looks like in between the sandwich here. So this is a very thin layer of interfacing. I use Pellon interfacing. I've been using them for really from the beginning of my quilting journey. And then what I like about it is it's fused on one side. And so what I'm able to do is I can just put these pieces down I don't have to create templates or anything like that. I can just cut these pieces out, put them all down, and this thin interfacing acts as a whole cloth. This acts as the substrate for my quilts. And then I have, just a normal batting, and then I have black Kona on it. And so that's the quilt sandwich that's there. It will sew down, once I'm sewing on it, it will sew down into this texture, which is very thin. I know it looks really puffy now, but it will sew down into that texture and it will be great when it's done. So that's it for now. I, just wanted to share, have a kind of a small virtual show of my florals, and I will certainly, try to do more of these virtual shows. I think it's kind of fun talking about the quilts, but love to share them, and I love to kind of share my thoughts on them and my techniques in construction. But this has been great. My name is Angela from Angela Heath Art Studio. Goodbye for now.